In this video, we will move away from the process for calculating various statistical techniques and begin moving into the area of inferential statistics. Specifically, we will focus on the concept of statistical significance. In this video, we will address three questions. What does statistically significant mean? What role does statistical significance play within the larger research process? And how do we determine statistical significance? To begin our lesson, we must first understand what statistically significant means, and more importantly, what it does not mean. One common misconception relates to the interpretation of statistically significant as meaningful or important. When asked the question, does statistically significant automatically mean that the results are meaningful or important, the immediate response should be no. So, if statistically significant does not indicate that results are meaningful or important, what does it tell us? Specifically, a statistically significant conclusion is one that says the results are unlikely to have occurred due to sampling error or chance alone. To understand how statistically significant results or statistical significance fits within the larger research process, we must begin with a brief overview of a typical group comparison research study. We begin by identifying a population, and from that population selecting a sample. Once the sample is selected, it will be divided into two groups, after which data will be collected and analyzed, and then finally the results will be reported and decisions will be made. However, when we begin to make decisions, we must begin looking for possible reasons for the observed results. For example, the results we obtained may have been due to the fact that the treatment was indeed effective. However, other explanations may exist. Perhaps there were initial group differences. In other words, one group was already performing at a higher level than another. Likewise, our measurement instrument or test may not have been reliable, or may have been invalid, biased, or had some other complication. Finally, it could simply be that these results were a fluke. In other words, they just happened by chance. It is then the role of the researcher to begin eliminating all the possible reasons for the observed results in hopes that the only remaining explanation is that the treatment was indeed effective. Now that we have an understanding of what statistical significance is and how it relates to the research process, we must now turn our attention to determining or how to determine statistical significance. We will see how to determine statistical significance within SPS in later videos. For now, we will use a simple visual illustration to understand how we determine whether results are statistically significant. Suppose we have someone who is at a shooting range and has already fired several rounds with this resulting target pattern. If this individual is allowed to fire 2 more rounds, we might have results that look something like this. Because the first round is similar to the prior pattern, we would not likely think twice about that result being unusual. In other words, it's close enough to the existing pattern that we would not consider it to be unusual or unduly influenced by something else. The second round that was fired is considerably different from the existing pattern. It would be this round that would be considered unusual or so far away from our existing expectation that we would begin to assume that something happened to cause that round to be that far away from the existing pattern. So, in simple terms, statistical significance is determined by comparing our observed results or our observed data to some predetermined expectation. To recap, we've looked at three questions. What does statistical significance mean? We saw that statistically significant simply means that the results were unlikely to have occurred by chance alone. What role does statistical significance play within the larger research process? We have seen that by eliminating chance as a possible explanation, we have taken one additional step or gone one step closer to actually identifying and concluding that the treatment was indeed the reason for our groups performing differently. And finally, how do we determine statistical significance? That is accomplished by observing our or comparing our observed results to pre-existing criteria or expectations.